Hello, everyone. This is Jim Renacci in the Buckeye War Room. And I'm happy to be here. We have great guests. We got another great guest today. For those who don't know or remember me, I was the U.S. Congressman in the Ohio 16th District for 8 years. Also ran for Senate in 2018 and was the Republican nominee. And of course, ran against Governor DeWine in 2022. Today we're going to talk about Ohio. We're going to talk about Ohio issues, Ohio politics, and anything related to Ohio. And I'm happy to say that I have a House District, 89th District House member, DJ Swearingen, with us today. He represents Erie, Huron, Ottawa County. He's been serving the State House since 2019 and is the chair of the Health Providers Services Committee. DJ, thanks for coming on board.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, Jim. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, so for those that are going to watch this and not know who you are, can you tell us a little about who you are, why you ran, why you decided to get in the House, and what your background is?
Yeah, absolutely. Originally family's from Eastern Ohio, Martins Ferry, and West Virginia. And I actually myself was born in West Virginia in Fairmont. So, family background was big in wheeling steel where my grandpa worked. And my other grandpa owned a clothing store, and most of his customers were coal miners. So, blue collar Democrat area, very working class, and grew up in the Columbus area, and then went to Bowling Green for undergrad. Met my wife there. Unfortunately, lived through the 2006 and 2008 elections, which weren't great years for us as Republicans. And I was actually on campus, part of the Republican group there when Barack Obama got elected to his first term as president. And that wasn't a great entrance into politics for me, but we've since rebounded. And like I said, met my wife at Bowling Green. We've been married for going on 15 years, and went to law school at Dayton. And then after Dayton, moved back to where I live now in the Sandusky area, and have a law practice. Some friends and I have some real estate that we own together and have a real estate business, and serve in the legislature. And originally, why I got involved in politics was really just to make our community a great place to raise a family. And it seems like more and more, it's really, in my opinion, less partisan and more common sense more than anything. I think some ideas coming out of the left just lack all common sense, quite honestly. And, both my grandpas, who themselves were Democrats, I know would not be voting Democrat today if they were still alive. So just to see some of the stuff that the left proposes and tries to pitch as mainstream and lacks all sorts of all lack of credibility is really something. But at the end of the day, it's about making our community a good place to live, work, and raise a family. And that's why I got involved in the legislature, and been there for 5 years.
Well, again, thank you for running. A lot of people always complain. They talk about things, but they don't step up. I appreciate what you've done. I know I did the exact same thing. By the way, I was born down in that area as well, and over on the Pennsylvania side. I was going to say, I won't ask you, but I bet your grandfathers were Steeler fans if they were from down in that area.
They both were big Steeler fans. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big coal mining steel mill, Pittsburgh Steeler fan base down there. That's for sure. Yeah. And of course, I was from right across the river in Pennsylvania, so I have those same roots. But now I bet you're an Ohio State fan, so we'll stay with that. We'll move on to just some topics so I don't get you in any trouble, just in case. Because I had to laugh when I ran for Senate in 2018. That was a big thing. Sherrod Brown kept saying, well, he's a Steeler fan. Like, does that really matter? I mean, what matters is getting things done for Ohio, and I appreciate what you're doing. Yep. With that, let's talk to one of your bills, which I think is important. You're the sponsor of House Bill 327. It's common sense legislation to ensure the workforce in Ohio are legal citizens. I mean, right there tells it all. I understand the bill's in the Senate. I mean, how important is this bill to get pushed through the Senate, considering the flood of illegal immigrants coming into our country?
Yeah, and it's an extremely important bill, Jim, and obviously I'm biased, and I got to give a shout out to my joint sponsor, Representative Scott Wiggum, who has worked so very hard on this bill, and Representative Wiggins in his last term in the General Assembly. He's been a champion for these types of policies, and really, a lot of the legwork that he put into this bill probably dates back at least a year, just doing his homework, gathering statistics and data, and he's just done a phenomenal job. And Scott's someone that I'm really going to miss as a colleague in the legislature. Going to miss working with him. So hopefully we can get this done before he leaves. But the bill really has its foundation. Like I said, my grandpa worked for Wheeling Steel, and I remember in the '90s I was a young guy, and NAFTA got signed by President Clinton, and I'll never forget my grandpa saying, "That's the end of American steel right there. There goes all of our jobs." And, that's the premise from which this bill comes out of, is that, we want to be for the American worker. And that's something that President Trump has really championed. I know, Jim, that's probably near and dear to your heart because of your roots as well. And to see what's going on at the southern border, but more importantly, to see that nothing's being done about it right now at the federal level is incredibly disheartening. And, as a state legislator, I can't control what goes on at the southern border, but we can realize that right now, in our opinion, every state's a border state, and we can act accordingly. So this bill says that any worker for an employer above 100 employees working in the commercial construction space or in the public works construction space has to e-verify their employees to make sure that they're here legally to work. It's a free service, E-Verify, that's offered through the Department of Homeland Security. So it's already out there. And a lot of employers do take advantage of it already because it's sort of protection for them to let them know that everyone they're hiring is here legally. The statistics show, and Representative Wiggum gathered a lot of this data, that when you have E-Verify in a state, it cuts down on not only your illegal immigration exponentially, but also all of the other things that come with it, human trafficking, drug trafficking. So there's a lot of beneficial side effects from a bill like this. And, I hope we can get through the Senate this year. If it doesn't get through the Senate this year, I plan to reintroduce it next General Assembly. And I think it's really vital, given what's going on as a state legislator, to realize I don't have any control over the border, but I can help impact policies in my own state and my own community. And this is one of those bills.
Well, it's a great bill. And look, I want to put a shout out also to Representative Wiggum. He's a great champion of these things. He's a friend, a good guy in the legislature. He will be missed. But I know he's moving back to his roots in Worcester and going to be working there. But yeah, he's definitely going to be missed at the State House. Yeah. Look, E-Verify is pretty simple. We should be doing that. So I'm glad you see that's in there. I wish we could do something about the sanctuary cities. I mean, look, when I ran for governor, I said we should, and maybe this is something the legislature could do, but we shouldn't be funding we shouldn't be giving the cities state money that are sanctuary cities, because they're costing us money at the same time. And there's got to be a way of fixing that as well too. So hopefully you can someday mesh something like that into a bill as well. But appreciate this. Tell me what's the holdup in the Senate? It sounds like a easy bill just to pass and move on.
Well, I'll give the Senate credit. We did pass the bill in June, right before we left for summer recess. So in their defense, they haven't had much time to deal with this bill yet. Hopefully in the fall, when we get back into session after the election, we're going to have a couple months to have hearings to hopefully get it on the Senate floor and get it to a vote before the end of the year. So there is plenty of time left on the clock. And, we're all running right now on how the border is a big impact to our state. And this is one of those bills where we can tell our constituents we actually did something about it. So many times you see politicians talk about the issues, but then they never go actually do something about it or get it done. And this is one of those bills where we can point to and say, look, we got this bill accomplished, and maybe we need to take a further look at this issue like you suggested, Jim, and do some other things. This is far from the end all be all on the immigration issue, but man, what a bill to champion to your community, to say, hey, I'm looking out for you, your job, that anyone competing for jobs in our state is going to do so in a legal fashion. And I think that's critically important.
By the way, I'd like to ask, did this bill, and it should have, did it have bipartisan support in the House?
Yeah, it did, Jim. It had bipartisan support. There was a few no votes, but it was a bipartisan bill, and I want to say it was. If it wasn't in the 80s, it was probably a high 70s for a vote count. And there's 99 members in the House, so anytime you're in the 70s or 80s, you've got pretty broad support for a bill.
Well, again, these are no nonsense bipartisan bills. Hopefully we can get something like this passed and move forward on it. But again, it's an interesting world we live in, and especially in politics, and you're living it.
Yeah, that's right.
So let's move on to another. You're also the sponsor of the Parents' Bill of Rights, House Bill 8. It's priority legislation that will protect the authority of parents to have control of their upbringing, education, healthcare, and mental health of their minor child. Where's the Senate on this? And if it gets through, will the governor sign it? It seems like also a pretty no-nonsense bill.
Yeah, and it's one of those bills, Jim. Quite honestly, it's we really shouldn't even need it. It should go without saying that parents are the primary educators, caregivers of their kids, responsible for their kids. And again, all the data bears out that when a parent is involved in their child's life, the outcome for that kid is better, no matter what area of life it is. So, if you have a parent that's taking a remote interest in what's going on in the classroom or kids' sports or their social life or whatever, the child's outcome is better than it was had the parent not been involved. And I think what we're seeing is a big push to almost have, I don't know if the word is like a technocracy where, the schools raise the kids and the parents are just kind of innocent bystanders. And that's never how it's been in the history of our country. Parents have always been vitally involved in their kids' education, social lives, sports, what have you, because they're there to lead and guide them through life and teach them about life and life skills. So again, common sense legislation, anything regarding mental health or healthcare decisions, the parents to be notified and involved. Anything regarding what we call sexuality content, the parents to be notified and involved. Again, very common sense, straightforward stuff. This was a little more of a partisan vote. We couldn't get any Democrats on this one. The Senate's had several hearings on it. The chairman of the committee has assured me that this bill will get a vote in November, so I'm very optimistic on that. I'm hoping the governor signs it. I don't know for sure where he's at on it, but again, this is another common sense bill that I really think is a no-brainer. And if the governor doesn't sign it for whatever reason, I believe we have a veto-proof majority to override a veto.
Well, again, this is one of those things we should get passed and override his veto. It should be a simple, common sense bill. And I can see the Democrats not wanting to sign off on this for some reason, that they want to give minors their rights, but it's just not, it's just not. We should have the parents' consent to minors. And I know I'd be fully supportive, and I'm glad you're pushing something like this through.
Yeah, and one thing that was interesting, Jim, is I've gone on in this process with this bill. This has been about 2 years in the making. I first introduced this in about September of 2022, somewhere around there. And the number of teachers that have actually come up to me and said, look, we want this bill because we don't want to be in the middle here. We want parents involved. It's not our job to raise kids, to make those decisions without the parents being involved. So that was actually really encouraging to see that along the way, where you do have a lot of teachers that are like, yeah, the more active the parents are in the education process, we like that. We like parents being involved in their kids' education. So that was encouraging that some teachers came forward as well to cheer this on as we went through the process.
That's good to hear. That was really good. Well, again, I wish you luck. I hope you can get this done this year as well. Let's talk about an issue that's kind of interesting for Ohio. It's coming up in November vote. Nobody really seems to understand it. It's, again, one of those issues, but you and I both know issue 1 is going to be something that will change the face of Ohio for years to come if it passes. What are your thoughts on defeating issue 1, and what has the State House really done with this, and what are you hearing, especially up in your district? Because I can tell you around here, in Northeast Ohio, what I'm hearing is they're not aware of it. And all they keep hearing is citizens over politicians, which is a real buzzword, which makes people want to vote for it, which is concerning.
Yeah, and I think you and I have probably both agreed, Jim. We like citizens over politicians ourselves, but that's the catchy phrase that doesn't necessarily tell the whole story on this bill. And I think it's important too on this issue to take a step back and look at the current process that we have, because I think a lot of people in the media and that are proponents of this amendment are kind of glossing over the fact that the latest redistricting that we did in 2023, so last year, we have a 7-member commission. 3 of the members are statewide office holders. So, you can't argue that Ohio as a state is gerrymandered. Those 3 office holders won those seats fair and square. You then have 2 members of the minority party in the leadership of the House and Senate, and then 2 members of the leadership of the majority party in the House and Senate. In 2023, those 7 members reached a 7-0 decision, bipartisan decision, on the current state house maps that we're now going to be running in for the 2024 election cycle. So I'm kind of at a loss for why this amendment is needed in the first place. If we got a bipartisan agreement on maps just last year without any material lawsuits, I think the ACLU might have filed one, but it was quickly dismissed. And we have these maps, bipartisan agreement. Why do we need this new amendment? And really, to me, it smells like someone's not getting their way, so they want to push this new process. And to me, that the person is a former Chief Justice who's now championing this amendment, because I think she didn't like how it went in 2021. I think it's totally unnecessary. I think it's going to split communities. It's actually going to take the voice of the people away, because no elected representatives are going to be involved in this. So if you're unhappy with the map as a citizen that you get, or the district that you're in, you have no recourse at this point. You can't go vote out a politician or run a race against the politician who voted for those maps. You're stuck with it. And I think that's totally undemocratic. And, like I said earlier, one of the more important things is there's no restrictions against splitting communities, cracking them apart. And this is the type of redistricting amendment that was actually found unconstitutional in Michigan because it split and broke apart minority communities. So there's a lot wrong with it. I think the current system as it is, has worked, especially when you have bipartisan support for the current maps. And the only reason it looks like we're doing this is because special interest groups want to control the process, and they're putting forth their own amendment.
Well, you're exactly right. And for those that I've been saying this time and time again, it's bureaucrats over elected officials who will be making this decision. It's judges who are retired, who have no responsibility to the citizens, who will be appointing this commission. And it'll be a commission that serves for a number of years, that's paid for by the taxpayers. So if you don't like it, you're still going to pay for it.
That's right.
And it just doesn't make any sense. Where today, if you don't like what was done, don't vote for the people that did it.
Right.
That's how simple it is. Yeah, we had 3 statewides and 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans on the commission. Don't vote for them. Just say, hey, they didn't do what they should have done. It's interesting that we bypass the elected official and then we go and change the whole process and put it in the bureaucrats' hands. And you hit the nail on the head. If people understand that, they're not going to support it. But you and I know there's going to be a lot of money dumped into this thing. And the TV commercials are already going to start running here real soon. Citizens over politicians. That's going to be the buzzword. And that's going to get enough people to say, oh, I like that. I like that idea.
Yeah, hopefully we can come up with our own, Jim. I haven't seen much of a campaign against it yet. Hopefully that's in the works. I'm talking about it in my own local community about how bad this amendment can be for the state of Ohio. But hopefully we see a concerted statewide effort soon.
I got to ask you, why didn't the State House come up with a competing, sometimes a competing amendment gets people more educated. I know there was some talk about it. It seemed to have stalled You have any insight as to why it stalled?
That's a great question, Jim. Just from my own, this is just my own anecdotal commentary only. It's not the House at large or the Senate or anything like that. One of the things that I noticed, I think we could have been given the time frame of when we would have been putting on a competing amendment. I think the optics would have been really bad, possibly, to put on a competing amendment when we did, because if you think about it, when this idea was first brought up, it was after the issue 1 folks had just certified their initiative and their amendment to the ballot. And, if we would have reconvened in a special session just to put on a competing amendment, I think that the citizens of Ohio would have looked at that very skeptically, and it looked like we were trying to pull a fast one at the last minute. I think it's possible we could have done more harm than good by doing that at the last minute. Whereas if we just go out and beat this thing straight up, go to the voters and take our message to the voters, just like you and I discussed here together on this podcast, I think we can win. So I think it ultimately might have done more harm than good. That's just my speculation, and we might have been called out as a legislature for trying to pull a fast one at the last minute.
Yeah, well, not to bring back bad memories, but when we set up that August primary, we kind of did that then too.
You gotta learn your lesson, and look, it's not a horrible idea to ultimately propose our own amendment at some point, but the current process we've got, like I said, I sound like a broken record. 7-0 bipartisan maps that we have, and really the what we should be shooting for is competitiveness. We should be going for competitive districts that are intact, that keep communities intact, to keep counties intact, to keep townships, cities, villages intact as possible, and make competitive districts at the end of the day, and let the voters decide who has the best ideas, who has the best policies. And right now in Ohio, that's the Republican Party for the time being, as evidence shows from the statewide elections that we've had recently. So let's get back to competition. I think competition is good for democracy. It's good for our state. And let the best ideas, let the best candidates win, and get away from this, notion of we need to have some sort of predetermined outcome for different districts and state house districts. And, if I had my drug, what if we drew them all 50-50 and let the best man win? That would be interesting to see too. I'd put my money on the Republican Party right now, because we just have all the common sense ideas that I think resonate with most of Ohioans. So.
What's interesting, I sat on a bipartisan Ohio State Commission about 1.5 years ago, and this was the issue. And I said, if the number one thing you have to do is get politics out of it, and that's almost impossible.
Sure.
But if you could get politics out of it, if you wrote a computer program that basically you wrote in all the things you need to do your districts and let the computer decide, that's about as close to not having politics involved. But one of the people said, yeah, but the person writing it would be politically motivated too. And you know what? It's probably right. Politics seems to get involved in everything, but
it's a process, and you're never going to be able to. Even this new, let's just say issue 1 passes in November, there will absolutely be politics involved in that process as well. To say that issue 1 is going to somehow get politics out of the map making process is really kind of outlandish in my opinion. So.
I would agree with you. Well, finally, let's touch base on the 2024 elections. I mean, you're in your district, you're running for re-election, you're on the ground in your House district. What are you hearing? What are you seeing in regards to the races this fall? How are people in your district feeling about things as we get closer to Election Day? What are they thinking about Harris and Walz versus, Trump and Vance? What are you hearing up there? I'm pretty sure that's a pretty, well, I don't know if that's a Republican area or not, because you did have, as you said, the former head of the Democrat Party had that seat. So it'll be interesting what you're hearing.
Yeah, this was a Democrat district, and Chris Redfern and Dennis Murray had this seat for years, and then Steve Krause beat Chris Redfern and pulled off a big upset. And ever since Steve won, it's been in Republican hands. I would classify this district maybe a more America First type district, where, we're for the American worker. We want to get rid of bad trade deals. We don't want to be in forever wars overseas, because this district actually did vote for Barack Obama in 2008 and then President Trump in 2016. So it's seen a dramatic shift in its politics, in my opinion. But right now, I think the synopsis can be best described by a conversation I had at the door with a voter the other day. He was a self-described, very, very conservative Republican, is what he told me. He said, "I'm not even asking for very, very conservative Republicans to be in the White House right now. I'm just asking for normalcy." That's what he said. And I said, that's that's a great comment, because he pointed to the border. He pointed to our fiscal policy with just the out of control spending and just radical printing of money that's driving this inflation and cost of living through the roof. And he said, I would just take normal at this point. That's all I want. So I think that's the best synopsis I've heard. Just get me back to normal. And I think that's where a lot of Ohio's at. I know that's where my district's at. And I think you're going to see Ohio very much go for Trump. I think Bernie Moreno can pull off the upset as well. And, hopefully we see a sweep across the board. So
what's interesting, and you hit the nail on the head, normalcy is the answer. And everybody's definition of normalcy is different.
Yeah.
There are those that do not support Trump believe he's not normalcy. Those that don't support Harris don't believe she's normalcy. There's this 8%. I was just on a call this morning. It does appear that Trump is locked in at 46. Harris is locked in at 46. There's this 8% that wants normalcy more than anybody, but their definition of normalcy is neither of the two candidates. And what I heard this morning, which was kind of interesting, it's going to depend on who shows up, which is, as we know, all elections.
Yeah, and this gentleman, he pointed to the border, cost of living, just kitchen table issues, healthcare. Didn't even bring up any of the classic conservative issues. Just simple things. I hope people just use some common sense when going to vote in November, because you literally have folks that are financing their existence. Consumer savings has never been lower. Credit card debt has never been higher. And that's just a recipe for disaster for our country going forward. So we've got to get back to some sanity in the White House and in Washington, D.C. But you've been there, Jim. Maybe sanity in D.C. isn't possible. I don't know.
Well, I will tell you, if we don't start talking about spending, both parties, and if you're paying attention to me, I've done so much. I've pushed so much out there about spending. We're 33. When I went to Congress, 10 trillion was outrageous. And that was, we were at 9.7 trillion. Everybody said we can't let it grow. It's 33 trillion and nobody's talking about it. And it's on its way to 60 trillion in the next 4 years. And nobody is talking about it. Nobody. So I certainly hope that's the normalcy we should be looking for, is figuring out how to quit spending money we don't have.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, when we pass these spending bills, we just print the money to fund them. And, as you know, that just devalues the dollar for Bob and Betty Buckeye in their savings account. So, I keep telling people that inflation is an extra added tax on the working class. So
that's so true. Well, in the final minutes, you want to talk a little bit about your race, how it's going? And
sure. Yeah, I'm running on my record, Jim. I've been in office for 5 years, pointing to all the bills that I've been involved with and that's passed, and the different constituent services that we've accomplished, and then also some of the local projects that we've been involved in at the State House. So I'm making this election about the results. I think people like to see their politicians have to answer for what they've actually done. And I knocked on a guy's door, this was probably 4 years ago. And this was a great question. And he was a registered Republican. And he said, "What have you done for me?" And I think everyone, if you have a politician at your door asking for your vote, should say, well, what have you done for me? And they should have a list of items of accomplishments that has earned them the vote of that individual that, that they're talking to. So I'm going to be running on my record. I'm going to be answering that question of what have you done for me? What have you done to make my family's life better, our community's life better? And that's going to be the focus.
Well, great. DJ, thank you for coming on. There's going to be a lot of people see this. It'll be the first time they get to know you. You sound like a patriot and a true conservative. So we're all going to be rooting for you, and look forward to maybe talking to you after November, and we get past that hurdle and talk about things that can get done now that we've reset the picture, and hopefully issue 1 fails at that point as well.
Yep. Fingers crossed. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you. Well, this is the Buckeye War Room. I want to thank you again for joining as we bring on different individuals around the state, talk about issues that affect Ohioans, all the way from Marietta up to Toledo, over to Youngstown. These are basic breadbox Ohio issues. So thank you for tuning in. Look forward to seeing it in the next episode of our Buckeye War Room.